የተከበራችሁ የሰላም ካቶሊክ ቲቪ ተመልካቾች በዛሬው የቤተክርስቲያን በተልዕኮ ላይ በተሰኘው ፕሮግራማችን አንድ አዲስ እንግዳ ይዘን ቀርበናል። አባ ኤምሪክ ራሳቸውን ያስተዋውቃሉ እና በዚህ ፕሮግራም በተለይ በቅርቡ የአፍሪካ መሪዎች በተወያዩበት ርዕስ ዙሪያ ላይ እንደዚሁም የሃይማኖት አባቶች ውይይት አድርገዋል። ይህም ፍትህ፣ ሰላም በአፍሪካ እንዲሰፍን በታሪክ የደረሱብንን የተለያዩ በደሎችን አንስተን ማስታወስ አለብን። እንደዚሁም ደግሞ በደል አድራሾቹም ጋራ ተወያይተን እርቅ፣ ፍትህ የሚሰፍንበት መንገድ መፈለግ አለብን ብለው የዚህ ዓመት ርዕሰ ጉዳይ ይዘው ተወያይተዋል እና የሃይማኖት አባቶችም ከመላው አፍሪካ በሴካም እና እንደዚሁም በአፍሪካ ዩኒየን ቻፕለንሲ አማካይነት የተዘጋጀው የአንድ ኮንፈረንስ ጉዳይ ይዘን እዚህ ውይይት እናደርጋለን። የበለጠ በአፍሪካ ፍትህ እንዲሰፍን እና ከታሪካችንም ጋር ታርቀን ወደፊት መሄድ እንድንችል በዚህ ርዕስ ዙሪያ ላይ ውይይት እናደርጋለን። ከዚህ ውይይት ደግሞ የበለጠ ስለነበረው ጉባኤ ግንዛቤ ታገኙበታላችሁ ብለን ተስፋ እናደርጋለን። አሁን አባ ኤምሪክ ራሳቸውን እንዲያስተዋውቁ እንጋብዛቸዋለን። Father, welcome to Salam Catholic TV studio to discuss an important matter. Recently there was a meeting and we will discuss on this important topical matter together. But before that, I would like to give you a chance to introduce yourself, but also the chaplaincy work you are doing for the African Union. But also SECAM, which is also representing the whole African Bishops' Conferences, and also explaining what SECAM represents.
Thank you very much, Father, for having me at Pax Catholic TV or Salam Catholic TV. Actually, I'm going to reintroduce myself because I was already here, and at that time I introduced myself. But because of the passing of time, let me refresh the memory of the audience. I am Father Emric. I am a citizen of Seychelles and Congo-Brazzaville, dual citizen. And I'm a spirit and priest, a member of the Congregation of the Holy Spirit. So here in Ethiopia, we work mostly in Borana, and also in what used to be known as Gamogofa, Arba Minch, and Dimeka. But and of course, Arba Minch and Dimeka. And in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, we are only as the only mission we have here is that of the chaplaincy to the African Union. So the chaplaincy to the African Union is a mission of the Catholic Church towards the people, the Catholic community of the African Union primarily. So the people who are working there and who happen to be Catholic, so we take care of them pastorally. So we do it under the jurisdiction of the Cardinal and the Archdiocese of Addis Ababa because of the agreement between His Eminence and the Congregation of the Holy Spirit. So the chaplaincy was entrusted to the Spiritans. And so part of our work is, first of all, pastoral care. So when we say pastoral care, it means the Mass, daily Mass, the celebration of the sacraments, penance, and like now we have entered Lent, so we also offer all the things associated with Lent, the Stations of the Cross, other reflections, and so we have that first aspect. But our mission does not stop there, because like in every chaplaincy, we also have what you might call an intellectual or a cultural mission, whereby we don't limit ourselves to the Catholic people at the AU. We also try to reach out to others, and then to make people know about what is going on at the African Union, especially in the church, and then also to make people at the African Union know what is being done at the level of the church. And then, of course, we also facilitate, given the fact that we have many contacts with the AU, facilitate organizations that want to work with the African Union. So I've been doing this job for more or less the past 6 years. So it's now I've acquired some experience. So that is the first thing we can talk about. The Catholic chaplaincy is named after St. John Paul II. So, and we are based at the Spiritan House, just opposite the African Union. Now, at the level of the African Union, the Catholic Church is represented not just by the chaplaincy, but we also have the Apostolic Nunciatura, because the official title of the Apostolic Nuncio, who is the Nuncio to Ethiopia, is Apostolic Nuncio to Ethiopia, Djibouti, Apostolic Delegate to Somalia, and Special Representative to the African Union. So, Special Representative of the Holy See to the African Union. So, currently, we don't have a Nuncio, but we have a Chargé d'Affaires, Monsignor Massimo Catherine, so who is also representing the interests of the Catholic Church through the Holy See at the African Union Commission. And of course, we have, as you rightly mentioned, SECAM. SECAM stands for the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar. So it means that all the bishops of Africa and neighboring islands, they decided to create a structure whereby they were trying to speak with one voice on issues pertaining to the Catholic Church in Africa. And since 2015, SECAM wanted to engage itself closely, more closely with the African Union Commission, because being the most important church numerically in the continent and giving also our representation on the ground, it was thought that it is better, in order to promote peace, reconciliation, justice in the continent, to work closely with the African Union. So since 2015, SECAM has had a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with the AU through the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security. And this year is going to be renewed so that common project or common initiatives can be achieved for peace. So SECAM is represented at the AU through a liaison officer, is a consolata priest, Father Stephen Okello, who is not with us because he traveled to Kenya. But we have been working very closely in making sure that the Catholic Church is well represented at the African Union. Each institution or organization with its own mandate, its own area of expertise.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Very clear, and a lot of work through the chaplaincy, but also through SECAM. And our viewers will be happy to hear more in the future, maybe about the activities in at the African Union, especially when there is the meeting, the high-level meeting, conferences of leaders, African leaders, and also leaders of the different organizations. You are involved in different ways, so it's an important task which the chaplaincy, but also SECAM, is doing, and would appreciate also to have in the course of the years also to share the activities which you are doing at the African Union. Today we have an important topic. This year the leaders, the country leaders were here and they had an important topic. And this topic is also very important for the Catholic Church, especially for the social teaching of the Church. As a mission, the Church is very much involved in justice and peace emanating from the gospel, emanating from her teaching, and the church is very well known for her social engagement in the society. So the African leaders, they took this initiative, a topic which relates also with the social teaching of the church. That is justice, reparative justice, and we are very happy, to have you here to get insight into, the discussion which the African leaders had, but also all those who were invited here to discuss on this important topic. And then afterwards also we will discuss the initiative which SECAM and your chaplaincy initiated, a conference together with many religious leaders from Ethiopia, but also from other countries as well, and continued also the discussion. So maybe first we take the topic which the African leaders discussed during their meeting in February. It was last month, but 2 weeks ago we can say. If you can briefly tell us about this important conference and topic.
Okay, thank you. Last year, so in 2024, during the summit of head of state and of government of Africa, a decision was taken. One of the decisions was to dedicate 2025 to the theme of justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. Because prior to that, there have been initiatives, there have been conferences, especially those held in Ghana, but not just there, to address the issue of historical wrongs against the Africans and people of African descent. But there has never been a unified voice of all Africans. And also, some countries, especially in the Western Hemisphere, they have been approaching that topic very reluctantly. So some of them, they were thinking that they were being accused for things that none of them, at least the current leaders, took part in. And why should they do reparations for current Africans who were not direct victims of slavery or colonization? So in order to have a unified voice and a unified approach to reparations, the AU decided to dedicate 1 full year to the theme of justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. And because CARICOM, that is the name for the which stands for the countries in the Caribbean world, they have been well advanced in the issue of the reparations, so the African Union decided to team up with them. That is why this year, during the launching of the theme, the Prime Minister of the island of Barbados came and addressed the Assembly of Head of State and Government together with all the other people who were at Nelson Mandela Plenary Hall. So the theme is a relevant one because Africans have suffered from slavery. And when we are talking about slavery, we can talk of slave trades in plural. People tend to focus more on the transatlantic slave trade, which took people from the continent to the Americas, the Caribbeans. But there is also the trans-Saharan slave trade that took people from so-called Black Africa to the Arab world, but mostly going towards North Africa and then the Middle East. But there is also the slave trade that took place against the Africans, but through Eastern Africa, Indian Ocean, taking people to Bagamoyo, Zanzibar, and then going to islands like Madagascar, Seychelles, Reunion, Mauritius. So the continent has suffered from slavery for from centuries. So it was important to remember that, because the consequences of slavery are not just, they were not abolished with the so-called abolition of slavery. There is what we call transgenerational trauma, which still affect people of African descent. But we can also think of people on the continent, because all these parents who saw their children going against their will, being kidnapped, and then sold as commodities. Even though there was also the complicity of African leaders, but many parents saw their children going, and then family dislocated. On the one direction, the wife, the other one, the husband, and children going other places. So even today, we still have that aspect of transgenerational trauma affecting people of African descent. But not just that, it has also created systemic discriminations against people. That you can go to many countries, like Brazil, for instance. Brazil is the second most populous country, black country, after Nigeria. So the way they classify people, they say that after Nigeria, we are talking about Brazil. But whenever you see things happening in Brazil, especially in politics, you don't see black people in the forefront. You can see black people in seleção, in football, and then salsa, in music, and co. But when it comes to the higher echelon of society, black people are very few. So these are cases, not limited to Brazil, of systemic discrimination against black people. And there is, after slavery, or the slave trade, which lasted 400 years. So it was not 40 years or 40 days, but 400 years. We also had, unfortunately, colonization. That came and divided the second largest continent in the world, Africa, into units whereby you find the people from the same ethnic group across the border. They call this country Democratic Republic of Congo. This one they call Angola. This one they call Congo-Brazzaville. And we can multiply examples. So this exploitation of Africa, because colonization was not in order to come and civilize us, because people with sound mind, they know that Africa is very rich in civilization and culture, but it was about exploitation, exploitation of natural resources and human resources. So it has created a system which continues even today. Even after the so-called independence, we are still victims of that system of colonization, and now we talk of colonialism, neocolonialism. We have in countries like South Africa, apartheid, which made people who were originally from a particular place to become second-class citizens, discriminated against. We also had genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. But when it comes also to DR Congo, people are also talking about Genocost, that the people, especially in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, for reasons that are not always very well presented to the media, millions of people, some people are talking between 6 and 10 million people, have been killed and more and even displaced. So all these things, all these historical wrongs, they needed a forum so that they will be addressed, and so that people will come to say, no way, we cannot go far if we don't look at the past. So the head of state took that decision, and the theme was officially launched this year, and we are part of it.
Continuing with this theme, the SECAM, or the EU chaplaincy, together, you organized another conference to make it aware to the religious leaders, but also to request their support, probably. Can you tell us a little bit about the initiative you took to organize a conference after the head of states left the country, Ethiopia, I think?
Yeah. So the whole idea is this. If we want to work meaningfully with the African Union, we need to know what is the agenda of the African Union. What are the leaders discussing? What are the main areas of interest? So once we know where our leaders are heading to, we can now say, okay, we are now going to bring our own contribution on the table. So it's not the first time that the chaplaincy is involved in similar activity. Back then in 2020, the middle of COVID, the AU decided to have as a theme of the year, silencing the guns. So silencing the guns is, it is still relevant. Actually, it continues up now to 2030. So at that time, the AU chaplaincy thought that it was not enough to let politicians, economists, and military personnel, military people, and diplomats discuss the theme of silencing the gun. What about the perspective of faith communities? So at that time, we had a theme. It was a webinar online due to lack of physical activities because of COVID pandemic. So we had it at that time. So it brought together the Vatican Nunciature, SECAM was part of it, also African Union, the CISA, Committee of Intelligence of Security Services of Africa, of the African Union. So, and then of course the chaplaincy and other partners. So it was already something done during back then. So this year, because the theme was also very relevant, we say we are not going to stay behind. So the idea came that faith-based organizations or communities and ethical organizations, we can also come together to give another point of view to the discussion. The point of view of people who are marked by faith, informed by faith, and then also ethical organizations. So the chaplaincy played a key role in that. And then, of course, the SECAM. But we also had other partners. We had some Korean partners you saw there, HWPL. We also had IAPD Africa, Interreligious Association for Peace and Development, Africa. And we also have the Pan-African Conference of Ethics and Bioethics, COPAB. And we had also United Religions Initiative, which was also part of the discussion. So basically, and then these organizations decided to team up, and then in partnership with CIDO, the Citizens and Diaspora Directorate of the African Union, which is the unit of the African Union in charge of implementing the theme of the year. So we decided to come with this side event after the summit to present the point of view, as I said, of faith-based communities and and then ethical organizations on the theme. So that is why you saw different religions and different partners coming together. So we had, of course, the AU addressing the event with the deputy chairperson of the commission, but we also had UNESCO being part of the event. And then we saw the faith-based organizations, for instance, SECAM, His Eminence Cardinal Berane Jesus addressed the side event, representing Cardinal Ambongo, who could not make it. And then we also had people from African traditional religion, what we call, what they prefer to call African indigenous spirituality, addressing the event. We also had a Jewish perspective on the topic, Islamic perspective on the topic, and even other people who came and enriched our contribution. So the whole idea was to come together, because it's much easier when you have many organizations, and then try to give a point of view of religious communities and ethical communities on this subject of justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations.
Yes, that is well prepared, and I have been there also. I have seen there were many organizations who were involved and are very much interested in the topic, and they were willing also to collaborate in the future to supporting also this important initiative. You have invited many organizations who have been also working in their own way on related topics, but also you invited speakers from different places. I have seen also a Jewish professor from Tel Aviv, who presented also a paper, or he gave also an input into the conference. And how was, the presentation? How did you evaluate? The whole the papers and those who were selected, to present the topics, because the topics were selected to support the cause, to support also the initiative. Can you specify a little bit about the content of the presentations?
Thank you very much for that excellent question. Sometimes it's better to hear from people to know how was the presentation. So far, the feedback we got from the participants, both, by the way, physical participants, those who were there physically, and then those who were online, it was that the speakers, they went beyond the expectations of the people. They were excellent. They were excellent because, you cannot talk of the contribution of religious communities, especially in Africa, if you don't listen to somebody representing African indigenous spirituality. This is the religion of our ancestors. They have been there for millennia, and they have accumulated some wisdom. So what is the approach to reparative justice? We needed to hear from them. So that is why we had Imboni, Dr. Radebe from South Africa, who came and passionately talked about the perspective of African indigenous spirituality. And you cannot honestly discuss contribution of religions in Africa without Judaism. Judaism has been in Africa for millennia, long before Christianity. And when we study the history of our continent, we know that Judaism was there in Egypt long before Christianity. It was there in the kingdom of Kush, in the Sudan today. It was there in modern-day Ethiopia, and even further than that. So, of course, if we want to know what is the perspective of the religious, so we have to invite someone who represents that faith. That's how Dr. Aaron Moore traveled all the way from Israel to come and present the Jewish perspective on the topic. And from the reactions I saw, people were very happy because they had to rediscover some passages of the Torah talking about concrete cases of reparations. And of course, he mentioned the Talmud and the Jewish traditions. And even in the case of Israel, as they were also victims of historical wrongs and the Shoah, the Holocaust, and how other nations were also engaged in doing reparations in their favor. So it was good to listen to that approach. And I do believe that Dr. Aaron did an excellent job. And of course, Christianity. That is what Cardinal Berane Jesus did in the context of the Jubilee year, because Jubilee has also to do with reparative justice and restorative justice. So he presented on behalf of SECAM the point of view of Christianity, but the Catholic Church. And then we had also Islam, because in Islam, Dr. Hassan Omari, who could not make it, but who had to intervene online, he had to tell us something about Islam. He gave us concrete references where Islam is also addressing the issue of reparative justice. But we also had other people in the USA who addressed us online with concrete cases about house ownership and land ownership in the USA. And we also had one Kenyan bishop, Bishop Dennis Ntumbi, who tried to open our eyes. Some people said maybe in provocative manner, but it was good that we had a conversation, a truthful conversation about the plague of Christians in Africa, especially today, as their persecutions is also a case which requires reparations. So for me, but these are not all the conversations, but that way of proceeding, bringing different point of view, a transversal approach to the issue, was what made our conference a successful one.
So the content of the conference was, well formulated, and the inputs were very much insightful. And people were also asking questions. I remember after all this, what are we going to achieve? Some were saying, is it to get only recognition, or are we asking compensation, or what is the purpose, the objective of all this, what the head of states are asking, and now the church or the religious leaders advocating also for justice. And the topic itself is justice to Africa or Africans through reparation, because there is a lot of wrongdoing to humanity happened in the past, and what would you hope for in the coming period will happen?
Thank you very much. The first thing is this. We Africans, sometimes we are being accused of having short memory, very short memory, that we tend to forget easily. And that one does not do us justice. That is why one of the key concepts in Judaism is that of hazikaron. Hazikaron means remembrance. In French, la mémoire. And this remembrance, this souvenir, this mémoire, as we say in French, is essential in the Jewish religion. And this is what has kept them moving for centuries. For instance, when we are now in Lent, we are heading towards Easter, the Pesach. And the way the Jewish Passover, the Seder, is organized, is made in such a way that the current generation, when they are talking about slavery in Egypt, they say, we were enslaved. They will not say our ancestors were enslaved. They say, we were enslaved, and Adonai, in his mercy, did this for us. So that when you are celebrating the Jewish Passover, it's as if you were there presently in Egypt, and you are reenacting the liberation of the people. So, and that concept of memory, including the painful memories of the destruction of the temple of Jerusalem, the exile in Babylon, and also the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and all the things that followed, including the Shoah. I think it is something even we as Christians, we can learn from our elder brothers and sisters in Judaism. That is why Pope St. John Paul II, just before his death, he wrote a book on memory and identity. I read the book in French, Mémoire et Identité. And Pope Benedict XVI is also somebody who spoke a lot about memory. And Pope Francis, of course, he has been talking about avoiding, overcoming the loss of memory. So, because when a people loses memory, it can easily be exploited. So that is why we don't want Africans today to be brainwashed to the extent of thinking that there was no slavery, there was no colonization, there was no apartheid, there was no genocide. That's why in the final message of the side event we had, one of the recommendations is that of having a day of celebration, that which is a continental day. You know, in some places, if you are in the Caribbean world, there are some days people celebrate the abolition of slavery. But in the rest of the continent, people are not even aware of that. But if we have, at the continental level, a day when people will remember all the historical wrongs against us, and each faith community will now also try to come with a spiritual perspective which calls not for fighting against others, but restorative justice and reparations, I think we are going to achieve a lot. Because the reason why we want people to remember is for people to say, never again. So if we are enslaved for 500 years, if not more, the Africans of today should say, we are not going to allow ourselves to be enslaved by neither power or whatever empire today, or even multinationals. We were colonized, and then the families were split. We say, never again. Let us unite and come stronger. So for us, it was not just about talking about things of the past, but we have a path for what comes next. So if you want to know what comes next, I can tell you first of all is that we are setting up a steering committee whereby we have people representing the different organizations, and then we are going to present the message, the final declaration, and the proceedings to the African Union as a whole, the chairman, President João Lourenço of Angola, the president of the commission, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf and his team, and we also present it to the regional economic communities, UNESCO, and different stakeholders. So we have already translated the final declaration into the 6 languages of the African Union. So we have English, of course, the original text was in English. We have French, we have Portuguese, we have Arabic, we have Spanish, and then we have Kiswahili. So it's already translated. So we are now working on a booklet, which we are going to present, and we are not going to stop there. We are now going to look at concrete examples, concrete cases on how to make what we discuss relevant for the future. So it's not just something done as a fashion because the AU had the theme. We do it, we take group photos, and then we say, go in peace, the mass is ended. No, that's not the way forward.